The first time I died, I ended up in a place where I came back with a compulsion. It reoriented my life in such a way that I'm saying that because one of the weirdest things that happened to me after my first NDE was that
How do you live your life amongst the rest of us that way?
it took a very long time of adjustment. It took decades. The first thing I did was I know that I'm known by the divine, and that is inescapable for me. I'm not afraid of the similarity of light and love is.
Have you ever wondered what happens when we die? It's a question that's perplexed most of humanity for millennia, sparked debates among scientists, philosophers, spiritual seekers, and skeptics alike. But what if some people have actually glimpsed the answer and come back with astonishing stories of light, peace, otherworldly encounters, or sometimes unsettling darkness they experienced on the edge of life? In this week's episode of the Senise podcast, I had the wonderful opportunity to interview the fascinating and inspiring Peter Panagore and step into the mysterious and life-altering journey that followed his near-death experiences. And yes, that was plural. There were more than one. Whether you approach the topic with curiosity, belief, or doubt, one thing is certain. Near-death experiences raise profound questions about consciousness, the soul, and what might lie beyond our final breath. Join me on today's episode of the Senise podcast as we explore the edges of life and what may lie just beyond it. Thank you, Peter, for joining us. I like to start all of my podcast episodes this way. You've been on my wish list for some time. I did tell you that initially, and we are very blessed to have you join us today. You've got quite the story or stories because you are a near-death experiencer, not once, but twice. Can you tell us a little bit about the first, the second, and how they compared?
The first time I died, I was 20 years old, and I was ice climbing in Western Canada in March, and I made a mistake, and I died from exposure while strapped into the mountain very early on a very cold day. And it was a long experience. Long in terms of the other side. I don't know how long I was dead for on this side, according to a watch, but I ended up in a place where I went through a life review, but it was all of the terrible things. Mostly it was all of the terrible things that I'd done, which weren't really that bad, but they caused a lot of pain to people. I went through this hell experience where I judged myself, where the divine was inside of me and I was experiencing the divine, experiencing all of the pain I gave away. Meanwhile, I was also shown that I was absolutely, completely beloved, and all I needed to do was accept the love on offer. And I did. And I need to also say, I wasn't being judged. I was judging myself. And by accepting the love on offer, I went through this series of soul level experiences where I was inflated in beauty, truth, love, awe, paradise, bliss, joy, well-being, healing, wholeness. And I was also a singular photon of a massive field of entangled photons that was the divine itself. And I had experiences of other incarnations, lives I had lived before. I saw the weave of our universe made of love and beauty. And I saw there was like a condensation inside of each human heart of the same light and love that was pouring out of this infinity. And there was a grand equality of belovedness and welcome and return home again. And a lot of other stuff happened. That's kind of a thumbnail of it. And I chose to come back because I saw my parents living lives with me and without me. And I saw the end of their deaths. I saw their being in paradise. And whichever I chose to stay dead in heaven, in belovedness, like it was a zillion, bazillion times better than here. Or go back and help my parents and then come back to the same paradise. So I chose to go back. And I was here. And then again, that was in 1980. And then in 2015, I died of a heart attack, a widowmaker heart attack with like a 3 to 5% survival rate for everyone who gets one. Runs in the family, and has taken some of us early. And in that experience was much shorter. I died in the ambulance just outside the hospital, and I this time the angelic being that had come to collect me the first time came to collect me the second time, and I the first time it absorbed me into it, and I was resistant to departure. I was like, I don't know what's going on, but it just took me. And the second time it invited me, and I went willingly because I knew where I was headed, and it didn't absorb me. We sort of left parallel together, and then I realized that it was quite sudden, and I sudden not so much for me. I'd been praying for it for every freaking day of my life since the first time I died. Take me home. I love being in love with the divine, but I don't want to be here. And I decided that I better check my life. So I kind of turned around, went back inside, saw my son and my daughter and my granddaughter, and realized that they needed me. I saw my granddaughter's life with me and without me. And I turned around and went back out into the darkness where the angelic being was politely waiting aside for me, and then came to collect me again with this grand welcome. And I said telepathically, I said, I know the length of human life is the snap of a finger, and that my granddaughter needs me. I can see that her life will be substantially different if I stay alive. And so if it's all the same to you, I'm going to go back in. And I just turned around and went back inside and woke up on it just as I was getting unloaded into the gurney, into the emergency center. And then I came back, and each time that I came back a different person. I mean, it's same brain, same physical, all the problems and advantages that this particular body has. But it left me with a different orientation and perspective. It's not just that my view shifted. Oh, I was this one thing and now I'm this other thing, or I thought this way and now I've learned some things and I think this way. My actual visual perception and my auditory and my feeling, my everything about me was completely different. And I had this consistent knowledge of my higher self. I lived up and above my body, and I could see I knew that I inhabited my body, and light emitted from everything, everywhere, all the time, especially human beings. And I fell in love with everyone, and it was a problem. And this excess love that was just, well, every time I come back, each time I come back, and also from other mystical experiences, these are transformative mystical experiences like NDEs, near-death experiences, and other kinds of near-death-like experiences. People call them transformative, and they are transformative. There's this woman named Hedwig of Antioch and Hedwig of Antwerp, 13th century, fabulous, brilliant poet, leader, female mystic. And I say that because women were repressed in those days as well, and she was a shining star of intellect. And she talks about shattering all these mystical experiences. They create a shattering of the self perception, and then they create a reassembly of the remaining parts, the more whole parts of the identity and the psyche. And doesn't just happen to me. It happens to everyone who has some kind of spiritual awakening. But there are degrees to shattering. You drop the vase and it's in two pieces, you glue it back together again. You drop the vase and it's 1,000 pieces. That's a different sort of thing. That's in a thumbnail.
In a thumbnail. It seems like at least the first near death experience, if I understood well and researching you a little bit, it directed your life in a sense because you have chosen to, it's your master of divinity. Did I say that correctly? And the path you've chosen since then, is that basically what's happened for you?
Yes, I had no intention. I was raised Greek Orthodox and Roman
Mm-hmm.
Catholic, and I kind
Mm-hmm.
of had enough of the church, and I had no plans on going to divinity school. I was going to be an architect in the family firm and go to graduate school. I got accepted. When I was applying to div schools, I also applied to architecture schools, and I got accepted there too. And I told my family, I'm not doing that. I need to follow this calling. And in Christianity, they call it a calling. In New Ageism, they call it a purpose or a mission. But it's
Mm-hmm.
it was this compulsion. I came back with a compulsion, and the compulsion was for the thing itself. And it gave me this longing and this emptiness of nothing in my life, and my human life satisfied me, but it gave me like a thimbleful of itself that I came back with, which was the driving force of the reorientation of my life. And so I ended up going to divinity school, and they don't teach mysticism at divinity schools, but they do have classes across the university. And I had a very understanding dean who let me do a 3-year independent study, and I never told her. Well, that's not true. I've told her recently because she's like 92 and we're still in touch. But at the time, I never told her why I was doing this. And she suspected something, but she didn't know what, and was kind enough never to ask, because I was not telling anybody. I would have either said nothing or I would have made something up. And I didn't
Right.
want to do either. And she was, so anyway, my whole, it reoriented my life in such a way that I was either going to become a monk of some kind in a monastery, or I was going to be living what they call a life of a householder yogi. And that's what I chose, was householder yogi, because I wanted a full life. I wanted to live in society. And
Mm-hmm.
so I got ordained in the United Church of Christ, and I hid inside the church for 20 years, not telling anybody that this would happen to me. And I practiced my yoga, and I practiced my interior journey through centering prayer and study,
Mm-hmm.
and also through service. So ministry was the life of service.
Right.
Um,
I've seen you mention before how individuals that have near death experiences or have experienced mysticism, especially in the church, don't really talk about it. Is that fear based?
Yes, it's fear-based because there's a strong historic movement in the church that the
Mm-hmm.
revelation, they call it the revelation of the Holy Spirit, ended with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that point on, uh, and it's the reason why mystics were isolated inside the church. They were mystics in the church, but they were in monasteries or in convents, and they were dangerous. And so they were
Mm-hmm.
kept separate from the general population, because what mystical experiences destroy dogma and doctrine, and the end of hierarchy and authority and not patriot, the patriarchy,
Mm-hmm.
patriarchalism. That's what I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
say. And so um, I kept mine a secret because of that. I kept it a secret. Uh, Lots of mystics keep it a secret. People have. Here's an example of more common mystical experiences. So I had this TV show for a long time in Maine, and when my show ended, I started. By this point, I was out of the closet with my near death experience, and so I started preaching in all these little tiny churches all over New England,
Mm-hmm.
and I began to ask this question: who here? Raise your hand if you've ever had an after death communication after your loved one died. Who here has ever had a visit? And
Mm-hmm.
nobody would raise their hand. Nobody. And I did raise my hand and said, me. And then I said, like, all right, come on. And 50 to 70% of every congregation, 50 to 70% of every congregation raised their hand. And then I'd say, who told somebody? And they all told somebody. Who's ever talked about it in church? Zero. And the reason is because people don't want to be seen as kooks. This is the same reason I kept mine a secret. I come from this family that we're this mix of first generation immigrant, second generation immigrant, and longtime American, like 1600 family. And so there's this immigrant drive for success, and there's this long tradition of I don't know, education. And so these two things combined, my family was like, you do well in life, and 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 that meant you had to have a good reputation. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to ruin my reputation, which was hurt, I'll tell you, badly enough becoming a minister. Okay, because that's no sweet pot of life. When half the population thinks you're crazy because you're a minister, it was at least it was a little bit better. So I kept it a secret. Other people keep it a secret because nobody wants to be the kook. And in the church, nobody wants to go against the dogma. And the crux point of the dogma is that there's this passage in the New Testament where it says even the devil can disguise himself as an angel of light. So if you have an after death experience or you have a visitation and your loved one is a little shiny, has a little glow, you don't talk about that because it could be the devil. And even though
Right.
in your heart, it's not.
Wow. In your near death experience, the one where you were ice climbing, you talk about an energy that presented itself to you. So you just mentioned something shiny, but you were visited by an energy, or an energy was trying to take you, if I understand correctly. How would you have known the difference? Like,
The
if that
difference,
happens to someone, how do you know the difference between an energy and something shiny?
uh, the shine comes from the energy. There's no, so
Yeah,
everything, all the language that I use about this is all metaphor. This is
right.
maybe the most important thing I learned in divinity school was that every single mystic throughout the history of the world, Jesus, Mohammed, Moses,
Mm-hmm.
who else? Lao Tzu, Kafir, Rumi, every single one of them uses metaphor.
True.
And
Mm-hmm.
because there's absolutely no language for this, because you're in a place where there's no language. So the shine and the light, they're the same thing. And
Right.
when a dead person you love comes to visit you, the light you see is well, source's light, the divine energy itself, the absolute, the unnameable. And
Right.
when I first encountered the light, it it self-explained. It did not. There was like, oh, I didn't have to think this through. Oh, is this the light? Is this the shine? It's self-evident in your heart. The light is always self-evident. It speaks for itself to itself. And because at the very core of our being, we are made of this substance way lower down in the spectrum in physics, be low, smaller than quarks and the gluons that put together quarks, way down in the very essence of the universe. This is the
Mhm.
very thing itself that we are. And so when it presents itself to us, people call it, oh, it resonates with me. I resonate with that. It's
Got
because
it.
the vibration of the
Uh-huh.
divine knows itself and it speaks to itself.
Mm.
So the shine is just like everybody's shiny. Everybody's shiny in their eyes. All the animals are
Mhm.
shiny. All the plants are shiny. Everything's got this glow to it. And I'm not saying that because I'm thinking that that's true. I'm
Right.
saying that because one of the weirdest things that happened to me after my first NDE was that everything shined, and it was this, and I knew that nobody else could see it. It was evidence to me that I was in my circle of life. I was the only one who was seeing this, and that I was like, I am not saying a word about this.
Someone who hasn't experienced that, it's you talk about there not being, time or space, or a lot of the things that we know. It sounds very abstract, and you've talked about it being, heaven is beautiful. That's the name of your book. How do you come back from that? Like, how do you just live a regular life,
You
coming
don't.
back from those experiences two times, having that understanding and that knowledge, knowing that most of the people around you have no idea what you're talking about or what you mean? Because as just a regular person, right, someone who hasn't experienced that, if you tell me, and I'm not a philosopher, obviously, I don't speak in what was it that you mentioned?
Metaphor.
A metaphor. I was thinking poetic, but
Oh, yeah,
uh,
poetically, the same poetry too. Yeah,
poetically. Well,
yeah.
I'm a songwriter, so maybe
No, yeah.
maybe I have a little bit of that, and I don't
I
even know it.
think
But I can't imagine a life where time and space do not exist. Coming back from that, knowing that the people around you can't even conceptualize that because it's just such an abstract thing to understand. How do you live your life amongst the rest of us that way?
It took a very long time of adjustment.
I
It
could
took
imagine.
decades. It
Mm-hmm.
took decades. The first thing I did was keep my mouth shut.
True.
And I kept my mouth shut because I knew that I could never explain to anyone
Mm-hmm.
what had happened to me and how I was living now. And so I masked. I wore a mask all the time, every day, all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And except for when I was doing my yoga or
Right.
doing my meditation or my studies, or I was
Mm-hmm.
out in nature. Or when I was by myself, my mask came off. But when I was with other people, I pretended as best I could to pass. I was trying to pass for a normal person, and the it was conflict. So in I like to use this example when before it was accepted to be gay or lesbian or with any other sort of sexual gender fluidity or any that whole group before
Mm-hmm.
it was acceptable to come out of the closet itself, the confinement. When I have a lot of quite a number of gay friends in my life, and the time before when everyone was closeted to the time after, the people who came after, they don't have the same sort of twistedness to it.
I
There's a
would
twist
agree.
that happens in the closet. You keep these secrets, and it's because the society shames you for it. It's not because it's bad or wrong. It's because if you come out of it, if you come out of that closet, you're shamed for it. And so, or rejected. And that space inside the closet is distorts it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had all this time by myself in this world, trying to live in the world. And so I got angry. I was, I was, I was diving into this thing because I needed the light to survive here, but I was angry at the light for allowing me to come back without like fully explaining to me how hard it was going to be among. It was like sometime. Okay, so there's this old Star Trek episode where the crew comes down to Earth and they're trying to find this guy from the future. And he came in another craft, and someone stole his craft, and now he's stuck here, and he's living as a homeless person, trying to keep his cool, trying to pretend that he doesn't know everything. It's kind of like that. You don't. I didn't want to tip off anybody, and so my choice was to go into the church where there was a juxtaposition where where no one would question my eccentricities of um, well, charity and kindness and courage and meditation. And so I kind of got to the place where I could mask more easily when I was in the ministry. And in my relationships, I didn't tell my family. Like, it's not
Wow.
just that I didn't tell strangers. I told my wife after we were married, like the next morning, and I offered her divorce on the day after we got married. I said, "Look, I couldn't tell you this before, and I don't expect you now that you know this to stay with me." But she
Mm-hmm.
did. We're still married. But I didn't tell my kids. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my siblings. I didn't tell anybody because, well, with the exception of two people
Mm-hmm.
and two other people that I had to tell. It wasn't that I wanted to tell them. It's that I had to explain something to them that they saw that I didn't want them to think that I was insane.
Did you have a liberation day, a liberation period? It happened over time. Um, what eventually happened? So it's a twofold question. What eventually happened that you just became so public about it? Because your story is out there a million times. Was it there a progression to it? Was there one day you said, I can't anymore and I just got to put it out there? And then now you're immensely public about it.
Yeah, it seems to be
How
a
did that play out?
paradox.
How did that play out?
So the day after I died the first time,
Mhm.
we were driving back from these Rocky Mountains in Canada back to Montana, where I was an exchange student, and I totaled the car,
Oh,
and it was a terrible. Lots of bad things happened on that trip back, and the so the next day. my climbing partner Tim took the big gear, the skis and stuff, and
Mhm.
he took a bus, and I hitchhiked back. And on that morning, as I had my sign out, Bozeman, I was a regular hitchhiker. It wasn't a new thing for me.
Mhm.
And I'm in this beautiful place. There is a roar inside of me. This voice, the voice with the capital V that has no sound, and it's roaring inside of me like I can't hear anything else. It's like I'm standing right next to Niagara Falls, and I just all I can hear is this, and it's telling me to speak, and I'm like, I'm not speaking. You, I have no words. How can what am I going to do? Zip my lips shut?
Yeah.
But there's this, I've had this compulsion to, part of the compulsion is to study, to practice, to learn, to live, to orient my life toward it as best as I'm able to. And I knew all along that eventually I would come out of the closet, but I resisted very strongly. And then I was serving this swanky coastal resort town church on the coast of Maine, summer resort community. And there was a huge embezzlement going on in the church and elsewhere in
Mhm.
town by the same person. And it wasn't the first embezzlement. The previous embezzlers were protecting the current embezzler. And through this long process in this church where 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 I was accused of all sorts of things, because I never worked for them, because I worked for the divine. I had no, it's like, I'm not a person of faith. I don't believe, I'm not a believer. And so you can't, because I'm not a believer, because I know that I'm known by the divine, and that is inescapable for me. I'm not afraid of dying, and I've never been afraid of dying. And so that attitude played into my behavior in the church, because I knew something was going on. So eventually we catch this person, the previous embezzlers who had positions of power in the church and throughout the community. Their power gets dissolved. They leave. We prosecute. She goes to jail. We get some money back. I try to welcome her back in the church, which didn't work. Nobody, everybody's like, we're not going to welcome her back. I'm like, well, you should, but they didn't. And so there came this Sunday morning where, after some, it was really terrible. I mean, they were publicly trying to destroy me, this group in the church, professionally, financially, personally, relationally. They had turned the entire church against me, and trying to get me defrocked it's a long story. And so in the end, after all of this was over, the one Sunday morning I walked into the sanctuary, and the deacons were meeting. And see, so I don't, this is the thing for nonprofits. Okay. It's true for all nonprofits. If you have a nonprofit and you have bylaws, they're not like suggestions. They're actual laws. They are
Mhm.
associated with actual law. And if you break that, then you're breaking the law, and
Yeah.
that's criminal. And so the deacons were not supposed to meet without the minister. That's freaking breaking the law. And of course, I'm like traumatized by all these 11 years of the abuse that I'd taken. I walk in the sanctuary and I think this is all over. And they're the deacons. And I'm like, what the? And then I walk by them and I go up to the front, and one of them comes up to me and she says to me, "We are so sorry." I was like, what? She said, "We're so sorry we treated you the way we did for all these years. The whole church is so sorry." And I thought, oh my God, I can tell them, we can't. Oh, she said to me, "We don't understand how you put up with what we did to you. You must have a lot of faith." I'm like, I don't have any faith. And so I decided that day to tell them the truth. And so from the pulpit, I tossed out my sermon and I told them my story for the first time. I said, this is the reason why I was able to endure with all the terrible things that happened here, because I don't have any belief. I'm not a faithful person. I know where I'm from. I know to whom I belong. I know the presence is here with me now. It never goes away. And then I got recruited to television, and I had this TV show for 15 years. And in the middle of that, I was working in New York City. Uh, I was working in Maine, but I was also working in New York City, and with all the religious communicators. So we get the Baha'is and the Krishnas and the conservative Judaism. And we got all sorts of the big table of people working together who are all the communicators for their religion. And we all went out to dinner one night, and I don't really drink much, but I drank that night a couple of drinks, and it loosened my tongue, and I told my story to them, and because they didn't know either. And they are the ones who talked me into becoming public about it. And so it was an incremental journey. And I wrote that book, and it became a bestseller. And the reason why I'm talking about it now is because I've always had this compulsion and knowledge that I had to be a spokesperson, not for myself,
Mhm.
but for the truth that the light and the love is actual reality. And that which we perceive here, as beautiful as this life can be, as hellish as this life can be, it is a temporary way station. And it's not just a journey to where we're going when we die, which it is. And the moment people die, they find out for themselves. So I'm not like some kind of evangelist, because I don't care if you believe me or not. I just don't
Right.
want you to think I'm insane. Um, is that heaven can be experienced here and now in this life, and it's transformative, and it's life changing, and it can be permanent and expansive. And so it was a it was a slow journey with moments of uh, transition. So both those things.
So, if someone was to experience a near death, have a near death experience, should they be afraid? Because were you afraid?
First time I was the dying part is, I don't know very many people in the near death community who enjoyed the dying part. The dying part is, I mean, it was the most traumatic night of my life. It was uh, freezing to death is a terrible thing.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
but the the dead part, the death part, that was great. Even though I went through that purgative fire of divine love, it was still great. It was still the best ever, and I've only wanted to go back. But I don't recommend you wanting to have a near death experience. It's disruptive. It So something like 70% of people who are married who have near death experiences end up in divorce. That's a pretty high number,
Oh,
because
wow.
the person, their value system changes, their approach to life changes,
Hmm.
their what they want out of life changes.
Hmm.
It's disruptive. And as I tried to describe a few minutes ago about my my perception of the world shifted, and that's disruptive. My choice not to go into the family architecture firm, that eventually ended up as my dad working alone, and it never grew in the way that we knew that it was going to. So it had consequences for my family, and that was not a happy thing. That was a difficult
Hmm.
thing. And it's, well, I wouldn't. You're going to find out anyway. Everybody wants to know now, and
Hmm.
I'm glad I know, but
Hmm.
everyone's going to find out anyway. Length of life
Sure.
is much shorter than you think.
Right. I mean, I would say it's probably the number one thing we can all expect and have in common, right? Is everyone's going to die. Um, your bad experience, you say, is dying. Is that the physical death? Mm.
The first time, it was the terror of fear of death and the
Hmm.
physical. I mean, everything hurt. It was you guys can look up what it is like to die from hypothermia. It's not a pleasant experience. In the
Right.
end, you fall asleep, and that's totally cool.
Right.
But
But the process.
but the process is terrible.
Right.
And the second time I was dying, I was in this yoga class, and I had this heart attack, and it was summertime, and I live in this small town, so I know everybody. But it's summertime, so there's a lot of summer people here, and
Hmm.
I didn't want to disrupt the class, so and I was like, "Geez, I'm having a heart attack." But I was running 5K the day before. I was super fit, and I went outside, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm dying here. Oh my God, I'm dying here. I've been waiting for this for the whole of my life." And I was happy. It was a good day for me. And then I started thinking about my wife and my kids and my new granddaughter, and that they weren't really prepared for this, and that maybe I ought to try to stay alive. And so I tried to sit
Hmm.
up and get to my car to get to the emergency center, and I couldn't even sit up. And eventually, of course, I survived. But The second time I wasn't afraid at all. And I've been telling my wife and my kids by that point and everybody else who asked that I was not afraid to die. And everybody would be like, yeah, okay.
You, I think you would know better than the rest of us.
But it turns out I'm not. I knew that I wasn't. And then when it came to the test, I wasn't. I was joyful.
hmm So even in sharing that experience with especially with the people who are close to you, they still don't. It's difficult for them to accept that death is not something to be afraid of or something to actually look forward to when comes knocking on your door, because again, as we can agree, it's going to happen to everyone. Even the people close to you, they don't get it, they don't buy into it, or still an abstract thing for those who haven't experienced it, right?
Yep. It's kind of like being a parent. You think you
Mhm.
know something about being a parent
I
when you get a dog
do.
or a cat, but then you suddenly have a kid and then you're like, this is entirely different. And
Totally.
it's totally different. And
Hmm.
it's sort of like that. And I don't blame the people who I love who don't understand
Of
me.
course.
They still love me.
Hmm.
Um, but my dad, as he was dying several years ago, this long, terrible death, uh, uh, he still in his agony he was still questioning my choices in my life. Why did you do this? Why did you
Yeah.
choose this path? There is and he
Mhm.
grew up in the Greek church, and he was a he wanted to die in the end because of the suffering, but he didn't understand that beauty awaited him, and I couldn't tell him. I mean, yeah, I could tell him, but what good did that do?
Do you believe that that is what's waiting for everyone, or
It's
you
the
don't have that answer?
Well, I have a yes and a no to that.
Okay.
All these mystical experiences are different. If you read through near death experiences or
Hmm.
mystical experiences, you'll see that there are similarities and differences.
Hmm.
And it's the similarity of light and love is the well 70% of us, and I quote these numbers because these percentages because of scientific research studies by the International Association for Near Death Studies and their related researchers. And so 70% of near death experiencers use two words, love and light, and those are metaphors, but we all use them. uh, some people go through hellish experiences and don't come out of hellish experiences. Some people go into hellish experiences like I did and come out of it in bliss and glory and light. Some people never have hellish experiences. Some people meet Buddha, some Jesus, some Muhammad. It's very various. And but what I can say, that's my no. My yes is love and light. The very core of the essence of every single person's being is the divine light, and nothing is lost. In my first NDE, I had this experience of being uh, within the totality of unconditional infinite love, and that it was aimed, lensed right at me. And then in a unique way, as I felt like I was the most beloved in all the universe. But then I saw that that was not true, that every human being was the most beloved, the most. And that's a paradox. You can't have, it's like you have something that's unique. There's only one, but
Hmm.
everyone was the most and most unique, beloved. And that love, because the infinite is love itself as it expresses itself to us. It loves itself, and nothing is ever lost to love. And so there is this ultimate re-unfoldment of it's like all these gold dust spots of love and light inside of every person get all melted back together again into one huge block of gold, and there's no difference between the molecules. They are one gold block.
That's again abstract to understand as a regular person. Although it sounds amazing. I like the way you um explain it and articulate it, because I think it's important for people who haven't experienced it to know that that possibly awaits them. I think it can give us great comfort in this life, um, did it change your parenting style? What you expect, the kind of parent you expected you to be? Because I mean, your first one was what, at 21?
My first 20.
At
So I didn't have
20.
kids till I was in my 30s.
Right. So I can imagine, you have sort of an idea even when you're younger of how I mean, I have my daughter at 19, so it's a little different for me, but just I'm sure you had a vision perhaps of the type of parent you would be up until 20. And then afterwards, when you actually have children, does it just change how you raise them, how you teach them, sort of instill that love that they're going to encounter pain and have their life review like you had at some point, I would expect. But does it change the way you raise your kids?
Yeah, I don't. I wasn't as much concerned about rules and regulations with them. We set parameters. Because kids thrive with boundaries, especially when they're
Hmm.
young.
Hmm.
And we had expectations about my wife and I. We're very communicative
Hmm.
about raising the children, and we try to stay on the same page. But I was more laissez-faire. He's um, you're going to experience these things. I'm going to let you experience it.
Right.
I'm not going to try to protect you.
Hmm.
Well, I would, yeah, of course, that's an exaggeration.
Right.
I used to ski and snowboard with my son all the time. And I'd be like, no, you don't want to go down that trail. Not, no, give it a couple more years and then we'll go down that trail. So I was that way, but if he wanted to try something, if she wanted to try something, let them try it and let
Ice
them,
climbing included?
neither has wanted to do that, oddly. um, but both of them have their own level of tolerance with adventure in different
Hmm.
ways. So my
Hmm.
son's adventurism is more physical, and my daughter's adventurism has been more social, I guess,
Mm.
might be a way to put it. And I love them both, but also I don't think I wasn't as attentive as a dad. I was there for them all the time. Okay, it's not like I
Hmm.
didn't,
Sure,
but
sure.
I wasn't as hmm, I don't know what the right word is. My heart, my I know what I'm trying to say. They are part of the physical reality of the world. Their souls, I
Hmm.
could see their souls, but the
Hmm.
physical reality of the world is all the same to me.
Right.
There's a kind of a smear of like you're smearing your cream cheese on your bagel. It's just a smear of reality that has a similar nature. And whether
Hmm.
it's, kids or puppy dogs, it's all kind of similar. I know that sounds, I know how that sounds.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, Peter, we can find you on YouTube. Your book is already out. It's been out for some time. We can learn more about your stories beyond what we talked about here. Anything else you'd like to add before we close this out?
sure. I specialize, have a specialty, and my specialty is in counseling people who've had mystical experiences. And
Mhm.
I'm not new at this. I began these kind of counseling therapeutic practices back when I was a minister. And I help people understand what happens to them. I don't try to tell them what happens to them. I
Mhm.
help them understand it from their own point of view. Because
Mhm.
the integration process after any sort of mystical, near death, spiritual awakening can be very disruptive. And I know from personal experience, I went through all of this by myself
Mhm.
and had no support. I know that support can help, and we're in a new age now where this is acceptable. So I'm available for that. I
And
help people
before
with
the
that.
internet, also.
Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah.
Mhm. Well, that's great. I love that you gave us your time today. It's very gracious of you to do so. There's a lot to learn from you, not just in your experience, but um, in your counseling. So people can find you at peterpanagore.com.
Dot love.
Love. Oh, that love. That's true. I did notice that. Hadn't seen that before, so I love that's out there and exists. Maybe I'll do that.
Yeah, you should. It's
I
great.
should because I do feel like my podcast is about spreading love and, living our best life, and you have a lot to offer in that. And one more question. Former stilt walker. Tell us a little bit about what former is and your stilt walking days.
I kind of aged out. I kind of aged out because stilt walking is inherently dangerous.
Mm.
Um, and you only get one fall, and I had
Oh.
mine, and
Oh.
I had a stilt break on me, and I
Mm.
continued to walk after that for a while, but it's been about 10 years. I walked for maybe 10 or 15 years. It's a hoot. Okay. And so when I began, I was the minister in this town I live in, and we had this Windjammer parade, and I had this theater friend. I have a theater background. I had this theater friend who taught me how to stilt walk, and I knew that the church council would frown on this. So I learned I got these stilts, and then I wore a mask for 5 years. So nobody in town knew that it was me. So I was literally masking. And then one day, I decided not to mask anymore. And stilt walking it was a way to bring joy to children. That's really what it was. It's just super
Hmm.
fun.
I think we do just about anything to make kids happy. I mean, I know I do. Every time I see kids, no matter the size, it's just or the age, it's they just bring life out of you, I think. So I think I would try stilt walking or like a unicycle, something
I
like that.
Unicycles are fun too.
Yeah.
I haven't done that, but it's on my list.
Mm.
It's safer, but stilt walking is a lot easier than it looks. And I use theater stilts with a single point on the end. You can get the stilts that people that use who do sheetrocking. They wear these stilts with flat shoes on the bottom, and they're a lot more stable. But
Oh,
these with the stilts from theater, you can dance and twirl and jump and twist and high kick and do all sorts of fun stuff like that.
cake.
And it's only about this one thing. It's about moving from A to B, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot. So it's about being always in motion and controlling the fall.
Hmm. See, I don't have a fear of heights, but I do have a fear of falling. So maybe this will help me overcome that. I might try it.
You should try it. It's super
Try
fun.
it. I should
I
try it.
still have my stilts. I'm
Oh
like,
my
I'm gonna get them
God.
on again.
We'll have to make we'll have to set some time aside for that. You can teach me how to stilt walk
Oh,
from
that'd be
down
great.
from down below, right? Because you're not going to do it again.
Oh, well, no, I had to deal with my wife. I wouldn't still walk in parades, but there was no restriction on just putting them on and walking around.
Oh, gotcha.
So I haven't had them on for a long time. But so the heart attack left me with damage in my heart. And so I have scarring in my heart, and I lost. And this is the reason why I stopped, is because I was an athlete my whole life. I'm still an athlete. I still ski and these kinds of things, but
Hmm.
I had this extra like 15%, 10 to 15%, where my heart level was bigger. I felt like it was bigger than my body, and so I could run further, jump higher, like all that kind of stuff. And now I'm on this side of it, so it's a little more restricted.
Wow. And you've continued. I know we talked about having the last question, and you've continued with your athleticism despite even some of the permanent damage caused by your NDE ice climbing.
Yeah, I don't ice climb anymore.
Right.
I don't do that, but I
Hmm.
do cycle on a regular basis, and I ski,
Hmm.
and I ski double diamonds and trees and moguls. I just go a little
Hmm.
bit slower than I used to, but
Hmm.
I was, yeah, I miss the level of athleticism that I used to have, but I'm glad that I still have the stuff that I do have.
But all 10 toes don't work as they used to.
I can't feel the bottom of the big right toe, and I have permanent damage, cold damage. I get, even though I ski, I wear
Mhm.
heated socks. I have heated boots. I have heated gloves. I wear a mask all the time. I don't have exposed skin. I adapt for my physical body. But yeah, everything works pretty well. It's just I have levels of I've had levels of pain from that day forward that I've
Mm.
learned to live with.
And our constant reminders.
Oh yeah, there's never a day that I don't know that I can't feel my big toe on the bottom. I'm like I
Right.
can feel it on the top, but I can't feel it on the bottom, and that kind of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, it's been great, Peter. Thank you so much for joining us again, for being so gracious as to be on our first wave of podcasts with the Christine's podcast. So, very much appreciate that. And thank you.
thank you for having me, Chris. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Same here.